You've felt it before. That specific exhaustion that comes not from working too hard or sleeping too little, but from being around a certain person. That low, persistent drain that you can't quite explain. You leave a conversation with them and something feels wrong. Not dramatically wrong, just off. Like you said something you didn't mean to say, or agreed to something you didn't actually want to agree to, or somehow ended up apologizing for something that wasn't your fault, and you're still not sure how that happened. And the worst part? You can't fully explain it to anyone else, because from the outside, nothing looks that bad. They haven't hit you, they haven't screamed at you, they're not doing anything that sounds terrible when you describe it out loud. In fact, when you try to explain it, you end up sounding like the difficult one, like you're oversensitive, like you're the problem. That feeling, that specific, disorienting, makes you doubt yourself feeling, has a name. And once you can name it, it loses most of its power over you. What you've been experiencing isn't conflict. It isn't a personality clash. It isn't just a rough patch or a communication problem that'll sort itself out if you're patient enough or kind enough or understanding enough. What you've been experiencing is emotional manipulation. Deliberate or not, conscious or not, the effect on you is the same. And you deserve to understand exactly what's been happening and why it's worked so well on you specifically. Because here's the thing about emotional manipulation that nobody tells you. It doesn't work on everyone equally. It works best on the people with the most empathy, the most patience, the strongest desire to be fair and see both sides, the people least likely to give up on someone. It worked on you because of your strengths, not your weaknesses. And by the time we're done here, you'll see every tactic clearly. You'll recognize them in real time. You'll understand why they worked, and you'll never be caught off guard by them again. There are patterns, specific, repeatable, recognizable patterns, and once you see them, you can't unsee them. Let's start with the foundation, the thing that makes every other tactic possible. Sign 1. They make you responsible for their emotions. This is the engine that drives everything else. And it's so subtle, so woven into the fabric of how they communicate, that most people don't catch it until they've been living inside it for years. Here's how it works. At some point, maybe early, maybe gradually, a dynamic got established where their emotional state became your responsibility. If they're unhappy, it's because of something you did. If they're upset, it's because you weren't careful enough, thoughtful enough, attentive enough. If things are tense between you, the path back to peace runs through you changing something about yourself. Not them, never them, always you. And because you're a reasonable, empathetic person, you accepted some of that responsibility. Because reasonable people do. Because in healthy relationships, both people do take responsibility for how they affect each other. That's normal. That's right. But here's where manipulation diverges from normalcy. In a healthy dynamic, responsibility is shared and proportional. In a manipulative one, it flows in one direction. Their emotions are always your fault. Your emotions are always your problem. Watch for this pattern specifically. When you try to express that something hurt you, the conversation somehow ends with you comforting them. You came to them with a wound, and you left holding theirs. You started by saying, "That hurt me," and ended by saying, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you by bringing it up." That inversion, where your hurt becomes their crisis, is not an accident. It's a redirect, and it's one of the most effective tools in the emotional manipulation arsenal because it exploits the exact quality that makes you good, your instinct to care for people who are hurting. You end up so focused on managing their reaction to your feelings that you forget you had feelings in the first place. But here's where it gets worse. Sign 2. They rewrite history and make you doubt your own memory. You remember something. Clearly, you were there. You heard it. You felt it. Maybe it was something they said that crossed a line. Maybe it was a promise they made. Maybe it was an agreement you both reached. You remember it because it mattered to you. And then you bring it up. And they look at you, sometimes with confusion, sometimes with pity, sometimes with a quiet, patient frustration, and they tell you that's not what happened. Not that they see it differently, not that their perspective was different from yours, but that what you remember simply didn't happen. That you're misremembering, that you've always had a tendency to do this, that you're too emotional, too sensitive, too quick to take things the wrong way. And here's what makes this so devastating. The first time it happens, you push back. You're sure of yourself, but they're so certain, so calm, so consistent in their version of events. And there's no recording, no witness, no evidence beyond what both of you carry in your heads. So a small seed of doubt gets planted. Maybe I am remembering it wrong. Maybe I was too emotional in that moment to perceive it accurately. Maybe they're right. And once that seed is there, once you've accepted even a sliver of uncertainty about your own perception, they have access to something profound. They have access to your sense of reality. Every future disagreement now has a shadow over it. Every time you're sure of something, there's a voice in the back of your mind asking, "But am I sure? Am I being too sensitive again? Am I making this into something it isn't?" That voice, that's not yours. That was put there. This is one of the most disorienting things a human being can experience, not because it's dramatic, it rarely is, but because it's quiet. It happens in small increments, one rewritten memory, then another, until you're no longer sure you can trust yourself. Say this with me: my perception is valid, and my memory deserves respect. Here's what you've probably been told about dealing with difficult people. Be patient, communicate better, try to understand where they're coming from. Come from a place of compassion. Maybe they've been hurt before. Maybe they don't know how to express themselves healthily. Maybe with enough love and enough time and enough grace, things will change. That advice isn't wrong in every situation, but when it's applied to genuine emotional manipulation, it doesn't just fail, it makes things worse, because patience, in the context of manipulation, reads as permission. Sign 3, they use your compassion as a weapon against you. Think about what happens when you respond to manipulation with patience and understanding. You absorb the bad behavior. You excuse it. You explain it away with context about their past or their pain or their struggles. And in doing so, you send a message, not in words but in action, that this behavior has no real consequences. And behavior without consequences continues. This is the part that's genuinely hard to sit with because it requires acknowledging something uncomfortable. Your kindness, your empathy, your willingness to extend grace, these are things you should be proud of, but in the hands of someone who manipulates, they become the tools used against you. They learn, consciously or not, that your empathy can be triggered. That a certain kind of vulnerability, a certain kind of suffering displayed at the right moment will redirect you every time. That when they're the one in pain, you stop pressing your own point. That guilt is the fastest way to shut down any conversation you start that makes them uncomfortable. So what do? They hurt. They display that hurt, and your instinct to care for hurting people does the rest. You find yourself apologizing for raising a legitimate concern because they cried. You find yourself backing down from a boundary because they called you cruel for having it. You find yourself more focused on making sure they're okay than on whether you are. That's not compassion being met with compassion. That's compassion being exploited. Stop. Because here's what I need you to understand about everything I just said. Recognizing this doesn't mean becoming cold. It doesn't mean abandoning empathy. It doesn't mean assuming everyone who's hurting is manipulating you. It means learning the difference between genuine pain and performed pain deployed strategically. And that difference is actually visible once you know what to look for. Genuine pain seeks resolution. It wants things to get better. It's open to hearing your side even through the difficulty. Performed pain, pain used as a tool, shuts the conversation down. It appears specifically when you're making a point they don't want to hear. It escalates in proportion to how close you're getting to something true. It ends the moment you back down. Watch for when the hurt appears. That timing tells you almost everything. Sign 4. They keep you emotionally off balance on purpose. This one is harder to see because it feels like inconsistency rather than strategy, but the inconsistency is the strategy. One day they're warm, generous, attentive, the version of them that made you care about them in the first place. The version that makes you think, see, this is who they really are. The other times are just when they're stressed, when they're struggling, when something's wrong. And then, without warning or clear reason, they're cold, critical, distant, or explosive. And you spend the next hours or days trying to figure out what you did, replaying conversations, adjusting your behavior, walking carefully. And then they're warm again. What this cycle does, and this is the part that's almost architectural in its precision, is it keeps you in a constant state of working to earn their approval. The warmth feels like a reward, the coldness feels like a punishment, and you begin organizing your behavior around trying to stay in the reward and avoid the punishment. That's not a relationship dynamic, that's a conditioning cycle. And once you're inside it, everything you do is oriented around their emotional state rather than your own needs, your own values, your own sense of what's acceptable. You stop asking, is this relationship good for me? And you start asking, what do I need to do to make them okay with me today? That shift, from self-directed to other-directed, from your own center to theirs, that's what the inconsistency was designed to produce, whether they designed it consciously or not. Repeat after me. I will not organize my worth around someone else's inconsistency. Now, here's what actually helps. Not platitudes, not just leave. Real, specific, usable understanding. Sign 5. They isolate you from outside perspective. This one is built slowly. It rarely looks like control at the start. It looks like preference. They'd rather spend time just the two of you. They find subtle reasons why your friends aren't that great for you. They make spending time with family feel like it costs you something, their mood, their sense of security, their trust. And gradually, the circle of people you talk to honestly gets smaller. The people who knew you before them, who might reflect back something true about what's changed in you, become harder to access. Not because they were taken from you, because contact with them slowly became too costly. This matters for one specific reason. Emotional manipulation depends on controlling your frame of reference. If you have people around you who love you and see you clearly, the distortions are harder to maintain. You'll say something out loud to a trusted friend and hear yourself, really hear yourself, and something will click. Isolation removes that mirror, and without the mirror, the distorted version of reality they've built around you becomes the only version available. So the first practical step toward clarity is this. Rebuild contact with people who knew you before. Not to talk about the situation immediately, just to be around people who see you as you, not as the version of you that's been managed and shaped and gradually diminished. That contact alone begins to restore something. Sign 6. Everything gets turned back on you. You try to raise a concern. By the end of the conversation, your concern has become evidence of your flaws. You try to set a limit. By the end, you're defending your right to have any limits at all. You try to talk about your needs. Somehow, by the end, they're the one who feels unappreciated and unseen. This is called deflection, and it's almost reflexive in manipulative dynamics. The moment accountability appears on the horizon, something redirects the conversation toward your tone, your past behavior, your supposed pattern of always doing this, your unfairness in bringing this up now of all times. It's not about the topic anymore, it's about disqualifying you as the person raising it. Once you see this pattern, you can name it, internally, to yourself, in real time. You can notice the moment the subject changes and hold your ground. I hear that, and I still want to come back to what I was saying. That single phrase, said calmly, without aggression, is more powerful than almost anything else you can do in these conversations. It refuses the redirect without escalating. It keeps the conversation where you placed it, and it signals, clearly, that the deflection didn't work. Sign 7. They reframe your boundaries as attacks. This is the one that tends to break people who are trying to do everything right. You've learned about boundaries, you've read about them, thought about them, worked up the courage to actually express one. And when you do, When you say, calmly and clearly, "I'm not okay with that," it lands not as a reasonable request, but as a declaration of war. You're being controlling, you're being cruel, you don't care about them, you're punishing them. Who do you think you are to tell them what they can and can't do? And you, because you're fair, because you believe in seeing both sides, you start to wonder, am I being too rigid? Is this actually unreasonable? Maybe I'm asking for too much. Here's what you need to hold on to. A boundary is not an attack. A limit is not a punishment. Saying, "I won't accept this treatment," is not the same as saying, "I want to hurt you." Those things are not the same, and the fact that they're being treated as the same is itself the manipulation. Healthy people, when they encounter a limit they disagree with, might feel frustrated. They might want to discuss it. They might ask for a conversation about it. What they don't do is make the existence of the limit into evidence of your cruelty or your failure as a person. The reaction to your boundary tells you more than the boundary conversation itself ever could. Sign 8. You feel smaller than you were before them. This one isn't about a single incident or a specific tactic. It's about the cumulative effect. And it's the most important thing to recognize because it's the clearest signal that something genuinely harmful has been happening. Think about who you were before this person took up this much space in your life. What were you confident about? What did you trust in yourself? What were you building? What did you believe you deserved? Now compare that to now. If the honest answer is that you are less certain of yourself, less trusting of your own perception, less clear on what you want and what you deserve, if you've gotten smaller rather than bigger through this relationship, that trajectory is information. Healthy relationships, even the hard ones, even the ones that challenge you and ask things of you, they make you more yourself over time, not less. You grow in them, you become clearer about who you are, not more confused. The shrinking is the sign, the consistent, gradual diminishment of your confidence, your clarity, your sense of your own worth. That's not a rough patch. That's the long-term effect of sustained emotional manipulation. And recognizing it fully, without minimizing it, is the beginning of reversing it. Sign 9. Your instincts have been trying to tell you and you've been overriding them. This is the last one, and in some ways, it's the most important. You've known something was wrong for longer than you've been willing to admit. There was a moment, maybe early, maybe before you were even fully in this, where something felt off, where a small, quiet part of you registered something and sent up a signal, and you explained it away. You gave the benefit of the doubt. You chose generosity over that quiet signal. And you've been overriding that signal ever since. Not because you're foolish, not because you're weak, but because you were taught, by culture, by family, by everything around you, that the generous interpretation is always the right one. That your discomfort is something to manage, not something to listen to. That instincts are emotional and unreliable, and that logic and fairness and patience are always preferable. But your instincts were right. They were right early, and they've been right since. Every time something felt wrong and you explained it away, the part of you doing the explaining was working against you. Going forward, not just in this situation, but in every situation, that quiet signal deserves a seat at the table. Not unchecked, not as the only voice, but present, heard, taken seriously. Because that part of you, the part that noticed before your conscious mind caught up, that part is one of the most important things you have, and it's been there the whole time, waiting for you to stop overriding it. You came into this knowing something was wrong but not being able to name it, feeling the weight of it without being able to describe it clearly enough to defend yourself against it. Now you have the names: emotional responsibility inversion, memory rewriting, compassion exploitation, strategic inconsistency, isolation, deflection, border reframing, gradual diminishment, instinct suppression. 9 patterns: specific, recognizable, nameable. And here's what naming does. It creates distance between you and the thing. When something has no name, it fills every available space. It becomes everything. When it has a name, it becomes a thing, a specific, bounded thing that you can see clearly and respond to deliberately. You're not confused anymore, and confusion was the whole mechanism. If this gave you language for something you've been living without words for, share it. Because someone in your life is probably carrying the same weight right now without the words for it either. And what you just found, they need too. The clearest thing anyone ever said about manipulation, and it's worth carrying with you, is this: it only works for as long as you don't see it. You see it now.